So an interesting story, Gazette today, the one I just sort of recounted before we went to the news, about what really happened in this whole Dawson College fiasco over English students now being forced to take, if Bill 96 actually goes through as is, 3 core courses in French. There's been a lot written about this, a lot talked about. And I think for the most part, I would not be, I'd not be, well, maybe I would be, maybe not. I'm not misspeaking when I say that a lot of people think this is a terrible idea. I know some people think it's a great idea to actually, have 3 courses in French that you have to take as an Anglophone. But these are, and I want to point this out, these are over and above taking French language courses to improve your French efficiency. Mm-hmm. These are taking courses in your core language or in your core study area. In other words, whether it's medicine or science, whatever it has to be, you would have to take those courses in French. And the fact of the matter, and we heard from a young lady last week, right, Brianna, saying this is going to be a huge problem and will cause a whole lot less Anglos to graduate. Yeah. Then we find out that based on the Gazette story, it was the Liberals. I always have to hit myself in the head when I say this. It was the Liberals' education critic, Hélène David, who brought this up because apparently it was going to go through for just Francophone students and Allophone students to have to do it, not for Anglophones. They were an exception to this until she suggested, no, it would be a great idea if you had Anglophones too.
And then David Birnbaum was like, that's a great idea.
It. At which point, I think the CAC at that point must have thought they won the lottery.
I'm sure.
To suddenly have that brought up by the Liberals, and then it becomes part of Bill 96. Robert LIBMAN is a former M&A, former head of the Equality Party. He's on the line. Robert, I want to talk about something else, but I want you to first weigh in on this story and tell me what you think based on the new information we have.
Well, it's quite the mess the Liberals are certainly finding themselves in now. And keep in mind that this was a recommendation that the Liberals made previously in their 27-point reform to Quebec's language laws. They had recommended doing this. The difference was, though, it was recommended as voluntary, that in CEGEP, English CEGEP should make 3 regular courses available in French if people want to take the opportunity to strengthen their French. But the difference with this amendment is it makes it mandatory. And, of course, forcing students to take 3 of their regular courses or their core courses, if you will, in another language could have an impact on their R scores. And as you know, CEGEP is an important transition between high school and getting into university. To get to university, your marks, your R score from CEGEP is critical, and taking some of your core courses in a second language could compromise your R scores and diminish your chances of getting accepted into some of the more competitive university programs. And that's where this could be very, very dangerous.
So
for students.
Is this an oversight, Robert, as you describe it? Because you said, and I remember we talked about this, it was brought up originally as a voluntary idea, and then it turns into now mandated. So who screwed up here?
Well, I think the Liberals going along with it, perhaps saying or suggesting, as to use David Birnbaum's words, the Anglophone community should walk the walk, basically saying he was proud that the Anglophone community would be ready to accept such an amendment. I think he was speaking on behalf of himself and perhaps some of his colleagues and not necessarily on behalf of the community. And as you said a few moments ago, Simon Jean Barrette probably fell out of his chair, rubbing his hands in glee that the Liberals were about to go along with them on this. So I think there was a major screw-up there by the Liberal Party. Whether or not they had consulted with Dominique Anglade is still a question mark, because there was a break in the proceedings when even Simon Jean Barrette wanted to consult with his own party, and I would suspect, or I think it would be unquestionable that the Liberals or Liberal members of the committee would have called their leader's office to do a bit of a caucus powwow on the issue and then decided to go ahead with it anyway. So there's still a lot of confusion about that. And even the next day, as you know, Dominique Anglade, when speaking to Dawson students, she had suggested for the first time that the Liberals might vote against Bill 96 in its current form. So that also fed into all this confusion, and who knows where we stand right now.
I was just going to say, Brianna, the 17-year-old that we spoke with, said exactly what you brought up, the point that it just places kids at a disadvantage, in terms of trying to get into the programs that they want to get into at university. So now we know the Liberals are saying, when we spoke to Dominique Anglade last week, she was very clear, we are going to vote against this. But what will that do at this point? Are we still going to end up being stuck with this?
It's an excellent question. Bill 96 is not yet adopted. The plan is to have it adopted before the end of the National Assembly session on June 10th, and then there's an election of course. So it'll be interesting to see if they try to walk back that amendment now or not. And if they can obviously come in the next committee meeting and suggest that amendment be changed to voluntary versus mandatory as far as being able to take those 3 courses in French. And I think if students are able to cope and handle it, they should be able to have that opportunity, but not be forced to, especially in that very competitive environment where they're trying to get into a university based on their R score.
All right, Robert, let me shift the conversation here to one of the things I wanted to discuss with you today. You know, you've heard obviously by now, I mean, you're the former head of the Equality Party. We know the history there. And first of all, I'm guessing you read Mario Dumont's column in the Journal de Montréal this weekend.
I did. He and I had our own flare-ups back then, about 30 years ago, when he was starting out. When he was actually the head of the Young Liberals at the time. But look, it's very important, and I think what people are missing or overseeing is, yes, the Equality Party didn't have the best ending to it. There was a lot of internal division at a certain point, and the upcoming referendum in 1995, started to polarize Anglophones, or polarize the debate between the Liberals and the PQ. So many Anglophones felt the need to scurry back to the Liberals at the time. But regardless of that, it was critical for us, and you must remember at the time on the floor of the National Assembly, to have a voice, to have our presence felt right there, to be able to bring up issues of concern about minority communities. We had access in question period to the government. We created a bit of a ruckus. You may recall some of the issues we were able to bring directly to the floor of the National Assembly, shooting down certain unanimous resolutions like Bonjour High and things like that. But more importantly, Aaron and Natasha, back then we were a daily reminder in the inner sanctum of French Quebec, right in the National Assembly, that we exist as a community and some of our concerns are very relevant. And we had that opportunity on the floor to bring it up on a regular basis. And I think we don't have that opportunity now. That's why a new party could perhaps give an opportunity for the community to have that direct pipeline into the National Assembly, because right now our voices are not being heard. We're political orphans.
Well, you know, Mario Dumont is saying, though, that's a wasted vote. A new party comes along and you park your vote with them. It's a waste.
Well, it's funny for him to say that, because he himself created a new party at the time that eventually morphed in some ways into the CAQ. But regardless, at a time when our community feels very much abandoned by the current political parties, how valuable is it to have our voices at least reflected in the National Assembly, whether it's for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, at least we're going to be heard, as opposed to not being heard. And when we were elected on election night in 1989, the victory night in itself was a much-needed shot in the arm for the community. As you may recall, our community felt for the first time validated after having been ignored, and for weeks the French media was beside itself after that election result. How did they not see this? Did the Liberal government go too far in overturning that Supreme Court ruling on individual rights? That's what set the protest for our party to succeed. So I think we need that. Our community definitely needs to feel that someone's out there speaking for it right now, and many feel that the Liberals are just not doing that.
And Dumont points out, I mean, really, he just takes issue with that. He takes issue with us feeling that we need to be represented, and he says that past efforts have been a disaster. I think those were his words, and he said something along the lines of, we need to work together with the other parties, not alone, to try to represent Anglophones. That's going to get us nowhere. What do you say to that?
Well, first of all, he qualifies the article by saying he thinks our concerns today are completely exaggerated. So he does. We know where he stands on that, but who's to say that any new initiative like this, or that we at the time didn't work with the majority at the time? We were very open to that, very much recognize the need to promote and protect the French language and culture in Quebec, but not at the expense of minority communities. It should not be a zero-sum game where the promotion of French means diminishing into the ground the Anglophone community. And that's what Bill 96 is becoming, it seems. Less and less about promoting and protecting French, but more and more about diminishing the visibility of English and the importance of the Anglophone community in Quebec. And that doesn't have to happen. And if it takes a new initiative that is not going to denigrate Quebec, but will at least promote the minority community point of view and some of the concerns issue for our community, I think that's a valuable exercise. You can label it any way you want. It's not an intolerant group. It's not a narrow-minded group. It's a group that wants to at least reflect a certain measure of what our community stands for, and they should have every right to do so.
Yeah, no one's saying they don't have the right, but I wonder what you think of the point, Robert, where he would say, you know what, let's say this party comes to fruition. And by the way, we're going to talk to someone at about 5:30 this afternoon. If that was to happen and you decided to park your vote with them, what you're basically doing is shooting yourself in the foot because you take away that power from the Liberals. Whether you like what they're doing right now or not, they've always been that other party to stand up for Anglo rights. What do you make of that?
But how have they been able to stand up for Anglophone rights? That's the problem the Liberals have. They have to toe a majority party line, and the Liberals are very much caught in that balancing act. They've got to, if they want to be a successful party, they've got to reflect majority concerns to get elected, and that means currying favor with the nationalist vote to some extent if they want to broaden their electoral base. And that's their dilemma that they have. They can't go out on a limb to represent the Anglophone community or speak up on behalf of our concerns because of that political reality that they live. And that's why there's a certain value, certainly at certain points in our history, where our voices should be out there and heard, depending on the circumstance and the political tension at the time. There are other times where it's not as necessary, but sometimes when we feel left alone and orphaned, our voices have to be heard. And I think this is a time where history is calling on someone to come up and speak up and at least give ourselves a shot in the arm that we need, that we exist in Quebec and we're a critical component of Quebec society, as opposed to just being neglected and denigrated again.
Now, I know you said in your answer just now that, when I asked the question, you said, well, what are they doing, the Liberal Party? But you know they're hearing what we're saying, right? I mean, that's not an issue. We ask Dominique Anglade that every time she's on the air. They know there is anger, frustration in the Anglo community.
Well, that's the key issue. But they cannot go too far in representing the concerns of the Anglophone community because, for political reasons, they have to cast the larger net, and to them, the soft nationalist vote is more important. They assume that they can take this vote for granted because there is no one else right now on the political spectrum that would capture the vote of the Anglophone community. That's why a concern of a party such as this will force the Liberals back or pull them back a little bit. And I think maybe some of what they're saying these days, that they might vote against Bill 96, is perhaps a last-ditch effort to salvage some of the furniture. They see their base, maybe among Anglophone community, and certainly showed itself in the last poll, starting to shrink somewhat. So perhaps they're walking a little bit back to at least try to solidify some of that before they lose everything, because the numbers certainly don't look very good for them.
Robert LIBMAN, appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much.
Always a pleasure.